The Sea of Thieves is full of surprises, but amongst all of the journeys I've heard from other pirates, none had experienced anything like this. For this tale, I was joined by some friends and we tackled the waves together, which made for one hell of a story for you guys. I'm Captain Daddy and you may be listening to something never done before on the Sea of Thieves. This adventure started with a rude awakening in the tavern from Sailor Soap, an old friend of mine who joined me for a portion of this tale. For a quick warm-up and to test us both at sea, we sailed out to a skeleton sloop and took it down with ease, and I felt confident having another pirate on deck. So we sailed back to the outpost, sold any loot from the ship and began our voyage with the Order of Souls, whilst raising an emissary flag for them. Now, although some people aim to be the greatest and most feared pirate on the seas, I do want to be world renowned, but I am mostly here for the adventures and enjoyment that I tell in these tales. So you can bet there was a lot of instrument playing, jokes, and me firing Soap's pet bird from the cannons. Having a deckmate on board was a whole new experience to solo slooping, even just to make the journey go faster. But as I would come to learn later, communication was more important than I had expected. We sailed from island to island collecting bounty skulls from captains of the dead that weren't that dead until we had finished with them, collecting any treasure we could find, and together we were raising our emissary level greatly. We even got a little carried away and enjoyed ourselves between islands.
Row your boat gently down the stream. If you see a crocodile, don't forget to scream.
But after a while, we passed a fortress which Soap had never seen before, so I showed her around and helped gather more treasures to load onto our ship. So far, everything was going swimmingly and we were having a whale of a time, and for that, once we had got to the nearest outpost, sold all of our loot and drank some grog, I knew that it was time for us to go forth and take on the Ashen Winds that was nearby, but we could not have prepared ourselves for what was about to come. We arrived at the island and were met by an Ashen Lord. But after one hit, he began to struggle, and that is when we knew we were not alone. A ship was anchored just offshore and another pirate was running towards us, so we quickly introduced ourselves as friendly, and to our surprise, he did much the same, so together we took on this overlord. But I knew at the end of the battle, I wanted the treasure to be ours. I didn't want to share, so I hatched a plan. Soap stayed there so they wouldn't suspect anything while I slipped away and began to sail our ship around the island to park next to theirs and sink it. This would have been executed so perfectly had another sloop not started heading our way, so instead, I called upon the pirates fighting the Ashen Lord to board their vessel and defend, as I did not want to leave empty-handed. The loathsome ship bravely sailed past but was met by a barrage of cannon fire, so he made a quick escape and never returned. Pirates are easy to steal from without knowing too much about them, but these guys had shown themselves to be honourable and were more likely better to us as allies, so we defeated the Skeletal Lord and formed an alliance. Even better, as they could see we were flying the Order of Souls emissary flag, they gave us every skull, including the Ashen Winds one, and I was more than grateful for this treaty. But that was not the last we saw of them. Heading back to the outpost, I made the mistake of being too greedy. I spotted a fortress I suggested we sack for more gold, but after clearing the ghosts and while we were loading the chests aboard, a Reaper brigantine had arrived and we knew we had to fight. Sadly, as much as we tried to fight it, these pirates were experienced and had us in an instant. But as I had managed to survive, I swam back to the fortress to pick up an explosive barrel I had seen. But this suddenly took another turn. Our friends from the Alliance had arrived and they began firing upon the brigantine, and I took this opportunity to do what I must. I swam over to the loot, hiding the chest with the Ashen Wind skull behind a rock before bringing the barrel over to them. Sadly, before I could get there, our friends had sunk, but they gave a valiant effort. And for the final nail in the coffin, I had brought the keg to their ship, and it was by the ladder that one of their crew shot me, blowing up their ship and sending me to the ferry of the damned. But arriving aboard our new vessel, I had noticed Soap was sailing back and was so close to them. The keg must have worried them, as once we arrived, they sailed away quickly with a handful of the loot, but due to my quick thinking earlier, our Ashen Windskull was safely back on deck. This time, no risks were taken as we made haste to the closest outpost to sell. That to me was one of the most fun and action-packed fights I had taken part in, and I couldn't wait to get back out into the seas. After we had settled from the previous encounter, we set about completing more bounties for our Order of Souls quest, until finally the last one was stricken down, and more skulls were sold, leaving me with much heavier pockets. We headed out together for a last little voyage, following maps that was leading us to treasure. But we were pretty incompetent and ended up digging up the whole island before finding some subpar loot. So we sailed back and sold our trinkets, and this is where Soap left the crew, and I sailed alone for a while, even struggling with a skeleton sloop. But after finally taking it down, I was awarded with a chest of 1,000 grogs, and many other treasures to sell off at the nearby outpost. I raised a gold hoarder emissary and headed out in search of more treasure, reading maps and solving riddles, and whilst doing so, I came across many random chests just lying there, and I could tell my luck was soon going to run out. But for now, I continued on this quest until all of the chests had been discovered. I sailed back with my first emissary level 5, and I was not disappointed with the results, before handing in my flag to join another friend on his brigantine. And this was my first time away from a sloop. Understanding the layout was more difficult than I expected, but we began to sail away with another gold hoarder's emissary, hunting for a vault. Again we sailed from island to island, and it has to be said, I much prefer being aboard my sloop. Whether solo or with a friend, it just feels familiar, and this did not. We solved many more riddles and dug up more treasure, following maps until we finally found all of the map fragments to show our next destination. We journeyed to the island and found a key to one of the vaults, so we headed there, but before we reached our final destination, something I had never seen happened, and I did not expect it to play out like this at all. After spending more than 50 hours out on the seas, I had finally met the one known as the Kraken. This beast rose from beneath the waters as we set our cannons straight on her and began to fire, taking down her tentacles. However, more and more kept rising. One of them picked me up and I thought for sure it was all over, but I was saved by one of my shipmates and was dropped into the ocean. We carried on the fight, fixing up the ship where needed, and after a long fight, we had noticed something was completely overlooked and almost cost us our lives. I went to get more cannons to finish off the Kraken, however, all of our barrels were empty and we had to fight this thing with nothing but our guns now. To make matters worse, we then ran out of planks whilst we still had many holes in our ship that we could not repair, leaving us stranded in the middle of the ocean with nothing. We refused to give up though, and whilst two were bucketing water, we dealt one final blow, and with that, the Kraken fell and left us for another day. After this, my memory was hazy, but as my shipmate Sam told me, I fired myself from the cannons as the others stayed aboard, and stole some wood from a nearby sloop, saving our ship. This allowed us to sail to the island and open up the vault, taking everything inside and even solving a puzzle to be awarded with an extra chest. We made it back to an outpost and sold everything, and honestly, this has to be the most insane adventure to date. On top of that, I made gold upon gold and even got face to face with the Kraken. But as well as all of this, I was able to sail with my friends and enjoy the seas, not just on my own but with others by my side. I will say that for now I will stick to the sloop, as the brigantine just didn't feel as fun, but whether solo or with a friend, you can be sure I will be back with another tale of my adventures on the seas. I've been Captain Daddy, and I hope you've enjoyed this tale. Whilst you're here, you should hear about my previous journey showing on screen now, where I look at the fastest way to level your Reaper's reputation inside the Sea of Thieves. But until next time, arrgh.